You're not my real daughter. The words sliced through the air like a dagger. Everyone at the dinner table froze. Forks suspended midair. Conversations killed mid-sentence. I blinked, heart pounding, lips trembling as my father, Gregory Sanders, rose from his seat and pointed a trembling finger at me. You mean nothing to me, Emily, he spat. I raised you out of obligation, not love. The room shifted with gasps. My cousin Haley choked on her wine. My Uncle Rick muttered, well damn. And my mother, Vanessa Sanders, just folded her arms and smirked coldly. It's time someone told her the truth. I couldn't breathe. I had just returned from graduating summa cum laude, hoping to surprise them with the honors medal I'd tucked into my coat pocket. I stood there in silence, feeling my whole world shatter as my so-called family stared at me like a stranger. You're a lie, Gregory continued, slamming a piece of paper onto the table. This DNA test proves it. You're not even my child. Your mother cheated, and you, he sneered, you don't belong to this family. The shame hit me like a brick wall. My cousin Josh snorted. Haley gave a low chuckle and whispered, figures. She always looked off. Even my own mother didn't flinch. I want you out of here, Gregory barked. Leave this house and don't come back. I stood frozen. My throat ached. My legs didn't move, but I turned slowly toward the door. Then, a chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor. A heavy cane struck the ground. Everyone turned. My grandfather, Walter Sanders, the former Marine and respected patriarch, stood up from the head of the table. At 78, he was still as commanding as ever. His steely eyes locked on my father. You shouldn't have said that, he growled. Gregory looked confused. Dad, what are you? You should not have said that. The silence was thunderous. Walter turned to me. Emily, stay right where you are. My vision blurred. My feet obeyed. Walter reached into the inside of his blazer and pulled out a thick yellow envelope. He tossed it across the table with the same force a judge might slam a gavel. It landed right beside the DNA report. Read it, he said. Gregory scoffed. What the hell is this? A truth I've kept locked away. Until now. Gregory opened the envelope. As he read, color drained from his face. His lips moved, but no sound came. His hands started to tremble. He looked up at Walter. This isn't true. You forged this. But Walter wasn't done. He turned to the room. You all want the truth? Here it is. Emily is not only my granddaughter, she is the sole heir to the Sanders estate. That letter confirms it. And I made the change the day she was born. Gasps erupted. Vanessa's jaw dropped. Rick stood up, stunned. Josh muttered, wait, what? Walter walked over to me and pressed another envelope into my hand. This is for you, Emily. Every deed, every asset, every account. You are the future of this family. You always were. I opened my mouth but couldn't speak. My voice was gone, trapped behind years of silence and pain. Walter's gaze turned ice cold as he faced Gregory. She's not leaving tonight, son. You are. Gregory stared, horrified. Dad, you can't. Get out of my house. Before I have security drag you out. No one moved to stop it. Not Vanessa. Not Haley. Not a soul. Gregory's shoulders sagged. He fell to his knees, right in front of me. Emily, he whispered, voice cracking. Please. I didn't mean to, I didn't know, but I turned away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl with no place at the table. I was the woman who now owned the table. And this was just the start. The air outside felt colder than it should have. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was the way my body hadn't caught up with what had just happened. My father, Gregory Sanders, was still on his knees when I walked out of the room. But it wasn't weakness that made me walk away. It was clarity. I stepped out onto the porch, the moonlight spilling across the stone steps, and breathed in as if I was tasting freedom for the first time. Grandpa Walter followed behind me slowly, his cane tapping the wood like a slow drumbeat. You all right, kiddo? He asked gently, settling on the bench beside me. I nodded stiffly. I don't know what just happened. He smiled faintly. You finally saw what they were really like. He paused. And they finally saw what I've always known about you. I swallowed hard. Why did you wait so long to tell me? Walter sighed. Because I was waiting for the moment you stopped needing their love to define your worth. That landed deep. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, the one he gave me. Inside were documents with power I hadn't even begun to grasp. Properties. Stocks. The Sanders legacy. And it all belonged to me. Grandpa continued. Greg thought he could keep the DNA test secret. But what he didn't know is your biological father isn't just any man. I turned to him sharply. What? Walter nodded solemnly. His name was Michael Reeves. A soldier I served with. Brave, brilliant. Died before he ever got to meet you. Your mom, Vanessa, she hid the pregnancy at first. But I knew. And I swore to Michael on his deathbed that I'd take care of you. I couldn't believe it. He was a soldier? He was more than that. He saved my life in '86. And when I learned he had a daughter out there, well, let's just say my definition of family changed that day. A new kind of grief washed over me, one I'd never known I carried. Walter reached out and squeezed my hand. You didn't lose a father tonight. You found the truth. And that's more powerful than anything Greg could have offered. Just then, the front door creaked open behind us. My cousin Haley stepped out, her expression uncertain. She walked over cautiously, arms folded, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Emily, I didn't know. I'm sorry for what I said earlier. I raised a brow. Which part? When you laughed? Or when you called me a mistake? Her face flushed red. Both. We all thought Grandpa would leave everything to Dad or Rick. Walter's voice turned to steel. Well, they thought wrong. None of them have ever earned it. Haley looked at me again. I know you don't owe me anything. But if there's ever a chance to. She stopped herself. I just wanted to say I was wrong. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because I needed to see something first. The next morning, I stood in the grand living room of the Sanders estate, my estate now. My parents were gone. They'd left during the night, too ashamed to face the rest of the family. The silence in the halls felt satisfying. I opened the safe behind the portrait of my great-grandfather, using the code Walter whispered to me last night. Inside were files, keys, and one handwritten letter, titled, To my granddaughter Emily. It was from Michael Reeves. I sat down to read. Asterisk, I may never get to meet you, Emily. But I want you to know that if there's one thing I regret in life, it's not getting to hold you even once. Your mother was scared. She made choices I won't blame her for. But Walter, he's a good man. He'll watch over you. And if life ever gets too loud, remember this. Blood makes you related. But loyalty? That makes you family. And you, my girl, are more than just a Sanders. You're Reeves. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small in a world you were born to lead. Asterisk. By the time I finished reading, I was crying quietly, my fists curled into my lap. That day, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to inherit the Sanders legacy. I was going to rebuild it in my name. The woman they laughed at last night would be the one they'd beg for mercy from tomorrow. And I'd do it not through vengeance, but through undeniable success. 3 days later, I walked into the downtown office building that had the Sanders name etched into the marble wall. But now it meant something else. The receptionist nearly choked on her coffee when she saw me. Miss Emily, she stammered. Do you have an appointment? I smiled calmly. No. I have a deed. Within 10 minutes, the boardroom was full. All the top executives, men who had worked under my grandfather and then grown arrogant under my father's control, were seated around the polished oak table. My father's chair was noticeably empty. I stepped to the front with Walter at my side. He stood, leaning on his cane, silent, but his presence was all the backup I needed. Let's make something clear, I said, my voice even but sharp. As of 72 hours ago, I became the sole legal owner of Sanders International Holdings. Every contract, every share, every property now reports to me. Murmurs. One exec, a smug guy named Troy Mallard, probably in his mid-40s, laughed under his breath. So we answer to a college grad with no corporate experience? I didn't flinch. I opened my folder and pulled out my degree, sealed with distinction. You mean this college grad? I flipped it closed and stared him down. You'll find I've spent years studying business, ethics, and innovation. While some of you spent that same time embezzling bonuses, cheating the books, and coasting on my grandfather's reputation. Troy stiffened. I dropped another folder on the table, one full of audit records I'd quietly pulled with Walter's help. Consider this your first notice, I said coldly. I'm not here to play CEO. I am the CEO. I turned to leave. And, by the way, your company credit cards have been frozen until I decide who's worth keeping. Gasps followed me out. Later that evening, I sat alone on the rooftop of the estate. The city lights sparkled, and for the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar, peace. Walter joined me again, 2 cups of cocoa in hand. You're making waves, he said. They underestimated me, I replied. And honestly, that's their mistake. Not mine. He chuckled. You sounded just like your father when he first started. Except you've got something he never had. What's that? Integrity. I looked out into the night. I'm not going to run this empire out of spite. I'm going to run it right. Walter raised his cup. Then here's to the future. We clinked mugs. But the past wasn't done with me yet. The next morning, I received a knock on the front gate. The guards called up and told me there was a man asking to see me. He looked distressed. It was Gregory. I met him in the driveway, arms crossed, heart steady. He looked nothing like the man who had stood proud in front of the family 3 nights ago. His suit was wrinkled, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly. I didn't know, he began, eyes avoiding mine. I swear, I didn't know what your mother did. I thought you were the proof of her betrayal. That's what I was to you? A living reminder of something you hated. His voice cracked. I was angry. Hurt. I took it out on you. And I was wrong. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a sapphire pendant. Your real dad, Michael, he gave this to me before he left on that mission. Asked me to give it to his daughter one day. I kept it locked away out of guilt, I think. I stared at the pendant for a long moment, then looked back at him. Is this your apology? It's everything I've got. I didn't take it. Instead, I said quietly, I don't hate you, but you don't get to be in my life anymore. Not as a father. Not as anything. His shoulders dropped like someone had just hit him with the truth for the first time in years. I understand, he whispered. Then he turned and left. I picked up the necklace myself, wiped the dust off the velvet, and wore it proudly the rest of the day. Not because it was from Gregory, but because it was from Michael Reeves, my real father. The man whose legacy I was about to honor by becoming everything this family never believed I could be. By the end of the second week, the entire company had changed. The old board members had either resigned or been let go quietly. The toxic culture? Scrubbed out. I brought in fresh talent, people who had been ignored, underestimated, overlooked. Interns who had brilliant ideas but were never heard. Women who were passed over for promotions. Veterans with integrity, but no connections. I gave them seats at the table. And I didn't just run the company. I transformed it. The Sanders name was no longer associated with scandal, nepotism, or greed. It became a symbol of renewal, of reinvention. Reporters began calling me the Phoenix heiress. But not everyone was clapping. Vanessa, my mother, resurfaced one evening through a message left at the estate. She didn't even have the courage to face me directly. Emily, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I was young. I was scared. And I didn't want to destroy your father's world. I thought keeping the truth hidden was better for all of us. I was wrong. But please don't shut me out forever. I may have failed as a mother, but I do care. I read it in silence, then burned the letter in the fireplace. Not out of hate, out of peace. She didn't deserve a second chance. Not yet. But I wasn't the vengeful daughter. I was just done being their victim. 3 months after I took over, Sanders International unveiled a new philanthropic branch in Michael Reeves' name, focusing on scholarships for children of military families. At the opening ceremony, I stood on the stage in a deep navy dress, the sapphire necklace catching the light. Walter sat in the front row, beaming with pride. "I stand here today," I began, voice steady, "not just as a CEO or the granddaughter of Walter Sanders. I stand here as the daughter of a hero, a man who never got to see me grow up, but left me a legacy anyway." Applause roared. I paused, eyes misting. This foundation isn't just a tribute. It's a vow. To never let a child grow up feeling like they don't belong. To never let a voice go unheard because of bloodlines, class, or shame. That night, the front page of the Tribune read, "From disowned to dominant, Emily Reeves Sanders rewrites her story." And yet, the past still had one surprise left. I was walking the company floor one morning, checking in with the new finance team, when I heard my name urgently called from the lobby. "Miss Sanders," the security guard said, "we have a man here. He says he knows you." He brought documents. My stomach turned. I headed down. There stood a man in his 50s, lean, composed, wearing a worn military jacket. His eyes looked haunted, but familiar. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quickly. I think I might be your uncle." I stared. "I don't have an uncle." He swallowed. "My name's Daniel Reeves. Michael was my older brother. We lost touch when he was deployed. I only found out about you after his belongings were returned to the family, and your name was in one of his letters." My throat tightened. Why now? I didn't want to show up asking for anything. I just wanted to know the niece my brother died protecting. He handed me a box. Inside were old photographs, army pins, a letter addressed to Daniel, in case I don't make it. I held the box with trembling hands. For the first time in my life, I saw Michael Reeves's handwriting. Saw the man I came from. And it shattered something inside me, in the best way. "I'd like to get to know you," I said softly. "But not here. Come home. Have dinner with me and Grandpa." Daniel's eyes welled up. He just nodded. That night, for the first time in my life, I had family. Not the ones who laughed when I was thrown out. Not the ones who smirked when they called me a mistake. But the ones who showed up with truth, loyalty, and love. And that was worth more than any empire. 6 months later, the Sanders estate looked nothing like the place I had once been kicked out of. The cold portraits of past patriarchs were replaced with art created by young, underprivileged talents, donated and commissioned through our new community program. The halls echoed with energy, not entitlement. The ballroom where I had once been publicly disowned was now used for charity galas and fundraising dinners, not family politics. And tonight, it hosted something even more meaningful. The Michael Reeves Memorial Scholarship Gala. The rooms sparkled with lights and hope. Survivors, veterans, widows, and students filled the space. Walter stood beside me, dressed in formal blues, chest covered in medals. And Daniel, my uncle, shook hands with donors, eyes bright, voice strong. It wasn't just a gala. It was healing. The night reached its peak when I stepped on stage, nervous, emotional, but stronger than I'd ever been. "I was disowned in this room," I began, voice steady. "But tonight, I reclaim it." The crowd went quiet. I was told I wasn't blood, that I didn't belong. But the truth is, family is not defined by DNA. It's defined by love, by loyalty, by the people who choose to stand beside you when it matters. I paused. I know what it's like to feel unwanted, to be discarded by the people who were supposed to protect you. But I also know what it's like to rise anyway, to turn rejection into redirection, and to make your pain your power. I looked out and saw faces crying, some nodding, some holding hands. This scholarship exists because of a man who never got to hold his daughter, but who lives on through everything she builds. Applause broke like thunder. I stepped down, and Walter pulled me into a hug, whispering, "Your father would be so proud." "Thank you," I said, voice trembling, "for never turning away from me." Then he added, smiling through misty eyes, and for scaring the hell out of every board member we ever had. We both laughed. Later that night, as the guests slowly left and the lights dimmed, I stood on the balcony alone, holding that same sapphire necklace, now warm from my skin. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned and froze. Gregory. He looked older. Smaller. A man completely undone. "I'm not here to beg," he said softly. "I just wanted to see you one last time." I said nothing, just waited. "I'm sick," he admitted. "Terminal. And when I got the diagnosis, all I could think of was you." Silence hung heavy. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I'm sorry. Not for what you've become, because that's incredible, but for what I didn't have the courage to be." For the first time, he didn't look like the man who hurt me. He looked like a man finally facing the weight of his choices. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but your time in my story is over." He nodded. "Fair enough." And with that, he turned and walked away. I never saw him again. A year later, the Sanders Reeves Foundation had funded over 200 scholarships, opened 3 shelters, and launched mentorship programs for girls growing up in broken homes. One day, a little girl, 8, maybe 9, walked up to me during a foundation event and tugged my sleeve. "Are you the lady whose dad said she didn't belong?" I knelt down, surprised. I am." She grinned, tooth missing. "My mom says you're a superhero now." I smiled back, heart swelling. "Well, I don't have a cape, but I do have something better." "What?" "A second chance." She hugged me tight. I held her longer than I needed to, because that was what it was all about. I didn't get revenge. I didn't get even. I got better. I turned their rejection into a revolution. And I'd never go back. Not for a second. Not even to look.